But speaking of who's your enemy, Pierce, let's move on to this next topic, which I know you've been itching to talk about. Wall Street was also your enemy. So I'm assuming at this point, this has been talked about already. It's been in the news for more than a week now. Wall Street got really angry because people organized on Reddit and they were able to outsmart them. So you guys, the audience members, I'm assuming you guys already know what I'm talking about. Other channels have talked about it multiple times. It's been all over the news. Mainstream news has talked about it. But let's start with you, Pierce, and then we'll hear from Joe and Aly. What are your thoughts on GameStop and Wall Street and Nokia and AMC and all that stuff that happened? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this has been one of the most interesting things. I mean, like, if you don't find it interesting, then I'm going to try to make you see why I find this interesting. Now, like Franco was saying before, I'm not going to butcher the processes and how all this stuff happened. I'm not going to explain what a hedge fund is or what shorting a stock is to you. There are channels that are going to do that better than me because I am too intellectually and mentally deficient to do that task. But I will say that one of the things that has me thinking about this subject in a funny way is that you get these like kind of meme like kind of content pushers and like Wall Street bets and 4chan gamer community that I think is unfairly malaligned often in mainstream media. And these people come from like all over the political spectrum. And I think that both the left and the right, especially people that are not like kind of seen in this neoliberal, neoconservative kind of framework, if you're not in that normie framework, you looked at that and you're just like, fuck yeah, there's the little guy sticking it to the big guy. And then what you see is a complete reverse. And you see that like the same rules that hedge funds set up for themselves in order to extract from us. When people use those same rules to extract from hedge funds and rich people, they just reverse the rules. So I think that this was a very clear example of class warfare, but you can't even really call it class warfare because what's been going on now, and I just finished a book by, I'm forgetting what her name is right now. Shit. She wrote the book Stolen, and it's basically like Griftopia. Griftopia was a book written by Matt Taibbi. It's like a Griftopia, but for Britain. And it's basically talking about how the financialization of the entire world, of our entire economy, has been this extraction process from the having resources and wealth siphoned from the bottom to the top, just procedurally. This has been happening throughout years. And what happened recently with Wall Street and GameStop stock, it's like, it's so naked that like when you play by their rules and you're winning, those rules will just get reversed. And I think that that is a kind of a concept that we should just kind of consider moving forward as always possible. And I'm talking too much, and I'll let you guys get in before I add anything else there.
I loved it because I've been, I think it was like the night before it really blew up. I was like, why is everybody talking about like, who is this little guy? Like just the Wall Street bets guy. Yeah. And so because like Reddit's like I mean, that's a whole culture in itself, which I like dabble in. I don't really like know it completely, but I have to say seeing like Wall Street guys trying to figure out like meme culture was priceless. I'm not gonna lie, just trying to understand like what was going on. But I think something is definitely to be said about this because it kind of like woke up another group of people that I would say before probably, I mean, they might have known that like some things were corrupt, but like I've been like a lot of different just like Discord chats because I just wanted to see what was going on. And I also was like trying to invest a little bit. I mean, I have before, but not much. But anyway, my point is that some of these people talking and they were so surprised like about the corruption. And I was just like, oh man, like I kind of envy their naivete because they were like, wow, I can't believe they're going to do that. And I'm just like, yeah, that's how it is. So, you know, the more people that understand like how this game really works, the better in the long run. That's why I found it exciting. And yeah, everybody wants to see Wall Street get screwed. I mean, there's billionaires like that are profiting off of COVID. There's, you know, they've gotten extremely, you know, even wealthier the last year. So people are feeling it all different types of ways. And this was kind of just like, you saw this little meme guy just like leading the charge of I love that picture, honestly, of this against Wall Street. And they were sweating for a bit. You know, now I think they've taken back control of things. But the fact that they were, it was good to see. And I think movements like that will continue to happen in different ways. And, you know, I was talking to somebody and they were like, they did a lot of work in Occupy Wall Street. And they were like, this is so much more effective in the long run because you're reaching way more people that aren't even there. It was a different time with Occupy Wall Street. You know, we weren't as connected as we are now, but it was kind of like Occupy Wall Street 2.0. And like I said, I think it will continue for sure.
I'm curious to know the financial backgrounds of the people from Reddit that decided to, I guess, quote unquote, overthrow the people, these hedge fund people, because if you have enough money to go ahead and stage this, I don't want to use the word coup. I don't want to misappropriate the word coup, but for all intents and purposes, that's sort of what it was. If you have enough financial resources to organize other people on Reddit to stage this sort of activity, then you're probably not nearly as financially disadvantaged as a whole lot of other people are right now. Because I would be willing to bet you that a whole lot of people that were in that Reddit subgroup that decided to get over on these hedge funds have a lot more personal wealth, maybe not necessarily to the level of these hedge fund managers, but maybe at least to the managerial class that are just underneath the hedge fund owners, as opposed to somebody that's making $40,000 or $50,000 a year that may not get a $1,400 stimulus check in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So as much as I think as the mainstream media tried to make this out as, hey, David beat Goliath, I think David isn't necessarily as weak and as small as we make it out to be.
That's a good point, especially if the mainstream media is saying, because in that regard, I really wasn't following. If they're the ones saying that it's David and Goliath, then that makes me actually, like, because I always, like, of course, I think the one thing, and then, like, late at night in my mind, I'll go to, like, some conspiracy-ish, and I'm like, what if this, you know, this is a great way to expose more to the American people the value of the dollar, which, well, that's going down, dramatically. This is another way to also get more people in the stock market, but I would say even just paying attention to digital currency, because that's obviously coming. So that's a good point you bring, like the people behind it. I'm curious about their background. That was my initial thought, because
they had to know how to, in order for them to know how to manipulate the system to overthrow the hedge funds, they had to have been involved in the system. So if they've been involved in the system, they obviously know about the malfeasance and nefarious activities that take place on Wall Street in the first place. So I don't want to make this. I don't want to downplay what happened with these Redditors and the hedge funds, but I don't want to make it. But at the same time, it's not as if these Redditors went into a gunfight holding a knife. They had guns too. They may not necessarily have been as big, but they had guns.
Right.
I think it's really funny what you brought up there, because that was brought up on the last episode of Useful Idiots with Matt Taibbi and Katie Halper, where they were they used that same metaphor though, David versus Goliath. Like, you can't just assume that this was David beating Goliath, but rather, and also I don't want to assume that all the organic parts of Wall Street bets are, you know, poor and anti-capitalist, and all of the, you know, sleeper agents are rich and for capitalism. I don't know how that breaks down, but I think it is a good impulse for you to question whether it is all organic. In fact, I think it's already been proven that many hedge funds themselves have made money off of hedging this past behavior, if I'm using that financial term correctly, to make money as opposed to lose money. That's already been proven. And yeah, like the metaphor that they made was, rather than this being David beating Goliath, this is more Goliath 1 and Goliath 2 ripping David in half and sharing him, which is an interesting thing to point out. And the last thing that I want to say, or maybe not a last thing, but just the last thing for now, is what I liked about this was just how naked it was, that the rules could just be flipped to benefit a certain class of person. And like Aly was saying, it's like, if you didn't know this before, if you were in like that naive kind of sleeper state where you didn't know that we've all been getting extracted from for years and years and years in terms of like value and resources and wealth going from the bottom to the top, maybe this is your in, you know, maybe this is what gets you into learning that Wall Street and fucking rich financiers and rich people, broadly, the capitalist class or the enemy, maybe that's what gets you in. And that's what I was excited about. And the fact that it's like this kind of class of people that I think often you can't really ascribe them to the left or the right. There's like this problem in America where everything has to be assigned a numerical value on a continuum of whether it is left or it is right. But what I liked about this is there are people from many political backgrounds that were like, yeah, fuck that guy, fuck the rich guy. And I think that the more of those impulses that you see in society, the better. And we had the Capitol riots, we had Black Lives Matter protests, and we have this stuff. And I think what you're seeing now in this kind of late stage capitalist era and this kind of decline of the American empire, the more, I want to say opportunities, but I also want to say like kind of occurrences that you get of kind of like a stirring of the underclass, even violent stirrings of the underclass. I think perhaps the better, because maybe that's what actually leads to change. I mean, a existing order isn't changed by the people that run it. It's always overthrown.
Yeah, you don't have a revolution from the top down. You have a revolution from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. That's how it is. So you bring up some excellent points as usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree.
Thank you, Stonewall, for the tip. Yeah. There's a channel, I don't know if you guys keep up with The Last American Vagabond with Ryan Christian, but he had on Whitney Webb, and they went into detail about how this could have been an insider job. I don't want to botch any of the details that they said, but it is definitely something to speculate if the mainstream media is talking a lot about an issue. They're trying to present a narrative, because they were trying to present this as a David versus Goliath situation. That's who we should be questioning the most. They want the public to have this, to adopt the narrative that they're presenting. But at the same time, I'm still going to laugh at the Wall Street people who lost money. Don't get me wrong.
That's what I took from it. Yeah, that's what I was taking from it. But I will have to look into that, because Whitney's usually been pretty right about everything. And like I said, right when I was reading it, I'm like, okay, because I'm reading like what some of these people are saying on Reddit, and they're just taking advice literally from a Reddit. They don't know who this person is, and they're pouring hundreds of dollars of their own money into these stocks. And all the financial experts that are saying they're going to lose money. Of course, it's like for the mainstream, but then they lost money. So I think that it's a multifaceted thing. I was just like I was saying, I hope it was a lesson for some people, and that kind of gets them to start questioning other things. It just takes that one thing that matters to them, and people's money is going to matter to them. So that's why I think this was pretty effective. But
I like that last point that you brought up. I'll just go really quickly. I like that last point that you brought up, where it kind of seems convenient that these occurrences are always spun in a kind of system supportive way by the media. And this is kind of related, not to boost my own point, but to the thing that we were talking about that Aly says that she's kind of writing on her Substack, where it's like you kind of wonder what's being manufactured so that it can later be reported on. That's the only thing that I want to say.
Yeah. And just to kind of go along with the whole conspiracy theory angle, I think it was only one hedge fund that lost money. There were another 19 hedge funds that actually made money.
They didn't lose money. They didn't even lose money. Like they were losing.
To move it around.
Yeah, they just had to move it around. The people that own Robinhood, it's like, I forget what their fucking name is. It's like something capital. They just gave the money to Melvin, the people that were losing money, and they got bought out. So, I mean, if you want to count that as losing, then I guess. But I mean, these rich people, they change these rich companies, they change hands all the time. They got their investment. What they lost, they got it back. And now they have more capital. They have more liquidity than when they started, and they were, losing money. So they're just moving money around.
Yeah, I think it was Citadel Group, I believe. Yeah.
Which kind of feeds into the whole conspiracy theory anyway. Which,
right.
Let's give the lower class a bone. Let's throw them a bone to make it feel like they actually won something, but then you actually didn't win anything.
You know what you can call it? You can call it class solidarity.
Yeah. That's,
perhaps.
There you go. That's a good point. Yeah, like here, you got this, you won, and like really behind the scenes, like no, you're actually getting more screwed. You just don't know it yet. But yeah.
And now they're watching for this in the future, so you can't win.
So Stick Whistle in the chat brings up an interesting question. He said, "Does anyone know how much money the Redditors have thrown at this? Do you guys know?"
No idea.
I don't actually. I think that. Not that I even believe it necessarily, but I believe that the Reddit people are going to be going to Congress. I think it's like Maxine Waters that really wants this to happen. So again, I don't know if I believe it, but they'll have to testify. So I'm sure some kind of number will come out. That's a good question though. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I would even believe what they say, but yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
So Daniel, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the stock, it didn't like 10x, it closer to 1000x than it did. It closer to 100 or I'm fucking up my numbers. Excuse me. It closer to 100x than it did 10x. And I mean, just conceptually, in order for a stock to go up, you just have more people buying it. So I would be interested in looking at that total volume and seeing how much of that total volume came from small donations, if you want to put it that way, as opposed to just like large lump sums. Because then you can kind of get that breakdown of like, who are the hedge funds playing around and making money in this fight, as opposed to like the organic forces that are indeed taking on the big baddie and, making some money off of it. So that's how you can tell. That will probably be what they look at when they do the lawsuit. Yeah, because all this stuff is documented, theoretically speaking, anyways. I'm sure it could be, what should you say? Forged, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be willing to bet you that a whole bunch of a lot of these Redditors weren't lumberyard attendants at Home Depot or Lowe's, or they weren't slicing deli meat at Safeway. I guarantee you a whole lot of these Redditors that got over on these hedge funds weren't doing those jobs in their daytime.
Shout out to the deli workers.
Out to the deli meat crew. Out to the deli meat crew.
I think there are a lot of
technicians also, and out to all the plumbers.
There were a lot of
wage slave in capitalism. Shout out.
Disaffected, like people from like the 2008 crash. I think there was a lot of that too. A lot of people that really never recovered. Because I really do see it as a mix of both. Because I mean, I don't know. I just keep trying to see this one as a positive one in the long run. But yeah, for sure, I want to know who was behind that. Because I'm like, wait a second. Like, I mean, it was a ton of people that mobilized, and if anything, let's just hold on to again that type of model. But then the flip side of that is, again, then the government just sees more and more how these movements can be started online and how effective they can be.
Censorship.
Mm-hmm. And so it just gives them more reason to want to get involved, which is why I'm like, no, I understand all this stuff is bad, the censorship, private companies, but the government is already involved. I don't want them more involved.
Right.
It's really
the other thing I thought was curious.
Full circle.
The other thing I thought was curious was why only one stock? Because we're always, it was
a few. It wasn't just GameStop.
Wasn't it just GameStop?
AMC, Nokia.
AMC.
It was like
Nokia.
half a dozen or a dozen. It was like kind of, nostalgia stocks, you can call them.
Yeah.
Calling them meme
so there's like a whole culture with it. Yeah. But then there's the Bitcoin push too, and then like Dogecoin, all that. And that, I mean, Elon Musk, like he just literally put the Bitcoin emoji in his Twitter profile, and people went, So, I mean, there's all kinds of factors into it. And that's why I think, because we can't get into it today, but like the fourth industrial revolution and all that is all going digital. So what a great way to use this as a, even easier way to get more and more people investing in digital coins, just getting them more comfortable with it, kind of feeling it out, even in the stock market.
I can't wait to talk about that more. About the fourth industrial revolution that the World Economic Forum is pushing for, and how they want to have this national digital currency that we all subscribe to. So Daniel Butler just gave us a tip. He said, a common feature of lower class uprising has been a middle class speaker. It's a class war, and the lower class needs middle class allies. If we could just show them that they are also in danger, then we might have more knowledgeable help. Where do the whistleblowers come from? Well, guys, where do the whistleblowers come from?
I mean, it's arguable how much of a middle class there is. Just a last kind of comment on the Bitcoin thing. I saw that as like Elon Musk trying to like hedge his bets against the dollar crashing, because we're certainly a nation that is just like further and further indebting ourselves, and like we don't seem to be really making any investments in our people. So it's arguable how long that structure can have a Wall Street that looks like it's just going up and up and up without anything crashing down. It just, I mean, it defies physics, let alone logic. But to answer that guy's question, I already forgot his name. It's arguable how much of a middle class America has. Certainly, since the 2007, 2008 financial crisis, which is what got me into studying what I studied for my bachelor's before I moved on to get my master's in politics. I was looking at how it just like circumstances could dictate that like people just lose money, lose homes, lose wealth. And, you know, as a younger person, I was like, what do you mean like the economy crashed and like people lost their homes? Like we haven't recovered from that. Like there was no Obama recovery from the 2007, 2008 financial crisis. And the United States has been trending negatively when it comes to, I don't know, I guess things that you can call middle class wealth for a long time now. And now after Trump, we're rid of Trump, but we still have the same problems that we had pre-Trump. And I mean, in terms of finding middle class allies, I mean, where are they? Like, I would say like there's like the precariat, the people that are kind of like, you know, wage slaves in a sense. And then there are the kind of petty bourgeoisie that might not necessarily be terrible people, but they're just not like the, you know, elites that are ruling society. And there would have to be some kind of movement where you get the petty bourgeoisie to realize that this is all leading to, you know, ecological disaster and the destruction of many members of the human race. And until we wake them up from their slumber and get them to be like the what that audience member was saying, our microphone or something like that, like, well, you know, the revolution won't happen.
To get more examples of how these giant corporations are our enemies, that we can let them know. Like big tech and how they're censoring people. Now with this Wall Street, how they bend the rules just to favor them. Like even though the people do the same tactics that they do. And then what we're going to get into with the pharmaceutical industry and how they pay off our politicians, and why we can't even get even the progressive politicians to force a vote on Medicare for all. Like there's all these examples that are coming up. We just have to keep pointing it out to them. It's just hard to do with a lot of them because they are overestimate themselves. A lot of them come from academia. And so they have this very, how do I say it, like arrogant.
It's arrogant.
Way of looking at the world. Like they think that they're right about how they
Could I add one last point and then I'll shut up for the remainder of this conversation? So I wouldn't ascribe any malintentions to them. I think that people are what the incentives that have made them or have shaped them to be. So like, I guess what I meant is like that class that you maybe have called arrogant. These are people that they are fine and they think that they're moving through the world through their own efforts. And the reason why they're good is because of, I don't know, their certain level of expertise, or like I'm a good person and that's why I'm okay.
Like I did it, why can't anybody else do it?
Yeah, and so what they want is they want to maintain their class position while also say like, yeah, they will vocally say I want a better world, but what they think is a better world is just like incrementalism. And when you convince the people that aren't the precariat, but the people that are the petty bourgeoisie, like, hey, there are people like, I know that you're wealthy and you want to maintain your wealth, but you're not who we're going for. Like the people that are way richer than you and that use their power and, you know, are fucking all of us, are leading us to a world that is going to be uninhabitable, let alone one that will bring in just more and more misery for a vast majority of people on this planet. And I mean, yeah, I guess the fight is fighting centrism and the people that believe it will lead us to a better world. This system, there is no conceivable way that this system will lead us in a better direction, because look at its trajectory. It'd be like a cancer patient that it's like the cancer spread throughout their whole body and like, you know that they're going to die soon. They just make a miraculous recovery and now they're doing jujitsu at the gym next door. Like that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And you have to get those non-precariat, petty bourgeoisie people to realize that.
If I could jump in, because that's a good point you bring up. A lot of them think that they are just fine. Like I don't even hate them for it. Like you know, you only know what you know, but they do think that they're doing the right thing. I'm surrounded by them in Chicago, to be honest with you. It's the type where will put up a sign. Like, that's why I think, like, just it's kind of like that, like, they want to do good in the world. And I'm generalizing a lot, but I grew up around a lot of this type of person, and I'm surrounded by them in Chicago. They want to do good. They're the type that reads a couple of news sources. You know, they're busy doing their jobs, but they feel like by putting up a sign, or, you know, like they like electing somebody who tells them things that make them feel good.
Changing their profile picture to a rainbow.
Exactly. Like following those trends, like they're showing their, you know, solidarity, because in reality, I think there's two kinds of people in the world, people that can handle the truth and people that can't. And I think a lot of them were in that group, which they really focus on, like, the, you know, just the perils of society. They don't have the answers, and it's a lot easier to hope the government's going to take care of it. Hence why Trump is such an easy boogeyman, and Biden, because of all of his moral platitudes. I had everybody in my neighborhood celebrating the day that Joe Biden, it was announced, like, that he won. Like, I could hear it from inside my apartment. I was just like, oh, because to them, they're like, we're free now. Like, they don't have to hear about these issues anymore. It's they can go back to living comfortably, hoping that someone else is taking care of the problems that were created. And that's why I keep going back to just looking at news sources like the New York Times, because that's the type I'm thinking of when you're talking about, like, the petty bourgeois, like, class. Like, they, even like Wall Street Bets, like, they were reading from their perspective. I knew that Wall Street Bets was going to get categorized with, like, Trump and with kind of like a right thing, because that right away, that plants a seed in their mind, like, oh, that's just some, that's some kind of extreme thing. Any type of little movement that pops up, they'll usually attribute it to some kind of radical group, so that it's not allowed in the mainstream too much. So I know I'm kind of going all over the place here, but I agree that, yeah, a lot of those people think that they're doing well. And honestly, I don't think that they'll really realize what's coming until it affects them personally. And I hate to say this, but it will get worse. I mean, they think it won't, but it will. Biden's not going to fix everybody's problems. The economy, the dollar's not going anywhere good. And it's just sometimes people, in order for them to believe it, they have to just see it. It sucks, but, you know, for some people, if they didn't see it in the New York Times, it didn't happen. Like my father, I love him, but I'll try to tell him about this stuff, and he's just like, no, they didn't say that. And I'm like, oh God, you'll learn one day.
Just keep pointing it out. Whenever Biden does the same shit that Trump has done, point it out to these people that still believe in the Democratic Party. Just keep doing that.